Our favourite boys are up next. The greenskins have also had a few long overdue changes in the latest balanced data slate. There's nothing super huge, but some things that have been asked for since the codex release, to be honest, and then a few other adjustments to make one of the other detachments just feel a bit more fun and viable compared to the others. They have also, as of yesterday, had the datasheets for the brand new and updated Tankbustas and the entirely new melee unit of the Breaka Boyz shown off, so we will also be taking a quick look at those in this video too. So to the Dataslate and field manual, the Orks caught 2-point increases in the field manual, with the Warboss and the Warboss in Mega Armor both increasing by 10 points to 75 and 90 respectively. Now this isn't a huge change, but it does actually sting a little more than you may initially think, because they are popular and useful HQs to have. So this is essentially going to be adding at least 30 or so points to most of your lists, because it is likely you were bringing at least 2 or 3 of them in some form of combination. It also stings for me a bit more because this change, this increase, I think has been made in relation to the adjustment to the WAAAGH rule, which we'll see in just a moment, which in all honesty, it never should have been that way in the codex. So you're kind of paying for GW's mistakes and sins a bit, which just feels a little bit annoying to me. But overall, despite the increase, they are still very good units. They are very useful for your army, and you will still be likely wanting to bring a few in. So it might just mean that you end up shaving off an enhancement or maybe a unit of Gretchen to still fit those war bosses in. In terms of the actual rules, however, the Orks do very well from this data slate. The core rule changes to the 3-inch deep strike and armor of contempt style stratagems don't actually impact them at all, as far as I'm aware. I can't think or see any stratagems or datasheet rules and abilities that let Orks do either of those things anyway, so they've kind of won in a roundabout way by not being hit by the nerfs that the other armies have got, so that change is actually quite a good one for them. And then on top of that, the WAAAGH has also changed. As I mentioned, it's changed in a way that people have been clamoring for pretty much the entire edition. The WAAAGH is now called at the start of your command phase. Previously, it was just at the start of the command phase, and it now of course lasts until the start of your next command phase too, so it does still get that whole battle round length of time. Now this may not seem like a huge change, but to Orc players this is absolutely massive. It means essentially that your opponent won't know when you are calling a WAAAGH even if you are going second, because previously one of the big issues for Orcs was that because you had to call it at the start of the command phase, even if you were going second in that command phase, you would have to call it. So your opponent would know in advance that you were going to have advance and charge in your turn. And that meant that they could essentially just play really cagey and defensively for their turn and utterly ruin the benefits that you would be getting from your rules. Now, of course, it's completely on you, and it is going to make that advance and charge threat much deadlier and much more difficult for your opponent to predict and play around. There is one downside to this change in that you can't do a preemptive defensive WAAAGH now, because if you are going second in a turn, you can't just call it at the start of the command phase to get that 5-up invuln across your army to weather the turn of enemy shooting. So it does have that one downside to it, but overall, this is just a huge net positive to me. It means you have control of your own rules much more, and it means your opponent really can't play around it and essentially have a turn to react to your rules before you even get the full benefits. So it's just a brilliant change, and one that I think 99.9% of Orc players across the board are going to be very happy with. On a more focused detachment level, we also got some big changes to the Big Hunt, which was one of the less used detachments, although personally one of my favourites because I am a big, huge Beast Snagger fan. The detachment previously had you pick a monster, vehicle or warlord unit from your enemy army, and it was your prey. And you could only pick a generic character unit if none of those were available or on the board, and you get some bonuses to your charge and your AP into your prey. Now it's been reworded slightly, so it's just any monster, vehicle or character. So it's just a little bit easier to keep those bonuses up, even if there are, for instance, no monsters or vehicles on the board, but the enemy warlord is on the board. He is just hiding way at the back, so you can't really get the benefits into him. You can choose another character that you can actually get a charge into to be your prey for that turn. It's again not a huge change. It's just a way to make your army feel a bit more flexible and a bit more fun to play, and is just a quality of life change, but a welcome one, I think. On top of that, the stratagem for the detachment, that one's even bigger, has now been changed as well. It no longer just gives you the ability to charge if you've advanced or fallen back against your prey target. Now you can do that against any target. It just gives you advance and charge or fall back and charge against any target. And then there is an added line which actually confuses me a bit. I might be being dumb here and someone feel free to explain it to me, but the addition to the strat is that you can now reroll charges against your prey target. But as far as I'm aware, that's part of the detachment rule of the hunt is on anyway. So I'm not entirely sure what that extra line actually does. I get the strat as a whole is better because you can now advance and charge or fall back and charge against anything. But the addition of the rerolls against your prey target, if you do charge them, that doesn't actually make any difference because you're still getting those rerolls charging into your prey target with the detachment rule. So maybe I'm just missing something, but either way, the strat is definitely better now and it's more useful. It is definitely another useful little addition to have to your arsenal. I just may be misunderstanding that last added line. Elsewhere, there were also just a few more wording updates with the changes to the WAAAGH. GARS gets a slight change to say if the WAAAGH is active rather than if you've called one this battle round. So just clarifying that it will still carry on if you call one in your turn, but you've gone second in a battle round and the game moves on to the next battle round, your WAAAGH is still be active until you get back to your next command phase. So not a big change again, but once more just a nice quality of life one, and one that just makes your army feel a bit more fun and better to play. So I mean, overall, the Orks have done very well out of this balanced data set. I think the changes to the WAAAGH alone are huge for them and really do just make the army feel better and feel more like it's on your side rather than working against you. And then the changes to the Big Hunt, just making it simpler to get those buffs up and keep them going and just give you a bit more utility in that stratagem. Still don't think it's going to be a top tier detachment by any stretch, but it definitely does make it a lot more usable. Elsewhere though, as mentioned, there were two new, or at least one new and one updated unit for the Orks, which got released yesterday. The Tankbustas return and the melee variant of the Breaka Boyz make their appearance. Tankbustas are now massively better. Gone is their horrible, awkward, fixed loadout of weapons, and now they each come with a rocket launcher, which is brilliant. They have gone up in points. They are now 120 points rather than 90, but they are significantly stronger. They've got a 4-up save and 2 wounds instead of the 5-up save and 1 wound they had before, and there is now 6 of them in the unit rather than 5. So all in all, they've gone up 2 points per model, which for an extra wound, a better save, and better weapon loadouts, I would say is an absolute steal. They still have their Tank Hunters rule, giving them +1 to hit and wound vehicles and monsters, and they still have their Bomb Squigs for some extra mortal wounds onto an enemy if they are within 12 inches of them, so they can be useful at killing off a few models of chaff or knocking the last few wounds off a tank, for instance. The Knob can also take a Smash Hammer for 2 Strength 6 -2 AP 3 damage swings with anti-monster and anti-vehicle 4+, so if you are worried about getting bogged down by an enemy, that can give you a tiny bit more melee punch, but the rest of them, they just have a standard rocket launcher, and one of them can take either a second rocket launcher for even more DACA, or a new addition, the Pulsar Rocket, which gives you a once per battle ability to improve the strength and AP of your ranged weapons by 1. So if you use that against a vehicle, your unit could be getting 5 D3 shots that hit on 4s, are strength 10, with +1 to wound, -3 AP, and flat 3 damage. Which, don't get me wrong, still not the most accurate unit in the world, but that can actually be quite scary. On average, that setup will let them do about 10 damage to a Rhino or an Impulsor, so they are maybe not the premier anti-tank unit into things like Land Raiders or Gladiators, but they are pretty good at taking out enemy transports, or at least finishing off those heavier tanks like Gladiators that you might have knocked a couple of wounds off before, because they do on average about 8 damage to something like a Gladiator. So with an attached character as well, something like a mech with a shock attack gun, they could by themselves kill off something like a gladiator, which is pretty impressive considering their base 5 up to hit. They can be joined by anyone that can join looters, so they can be joined by mechs, big mechs, pain boys, and that sort of thing. So they do get the option for some nice bonuses. They get rerolling hit rolls of 1 or potentially a 5 up feel no pain from the pain boy to help keep them alive a little bit longer. So they are just all round a solid shooting unit, I think. And whilst they do need a little bit of support to get round that 5+ to hit, when they do hit hard. The Breaka boys, by comparison, are the melee variant. They are pricier at 140 points, but they keep the same 2 wounds, toughness 5, 4 up save, and 6 models in the unit. They all come with smash hammers, which nets them like above, 2 strength 6, -2 AP, 3 damage swings with anti-monster and anti-vehicle 4+. So they've got a decently scary profile, albeit with a rather limited number of attacks. In terms of their datasheet rules, they do have the 2 bomb squigs, like the Tankbustas, to throw some mortal wounds around, and they can also re-roll their charge rolls, which for a melee unit is always really, really strong. One of them can take a tank hammer, which is the same profile as your smash hammers, but also has hazardous and devastating wounds, so into monsters and vehicles, proccing that on a 4+ means it's a fairly reliable way to chunk a good 3 or even 6 damage off a vehicle in one go. And then one of them can take Knucklebusters, which are only -1 AP and 1 damage, but they've got 5 attacks and they are twin linked. So they're still okay into vehicles and monsters, but that seems to be, to me, to have a good way to have some anti-chaff in the unit in case anything tries to lock them down. Overall, I would say the Breaka boys are okay. The smash hammers are decent, but quite low in their number of attacks, and that is a big downside to them. They do average about 8 wounds into a 3 up save vehicle, so they can do some good work. But I would say overall, if you had to choose between these guys and Tankbusters, I would say the Tankbusters are probably the better pick. Where you might want to consider Breaka boys over them is in some of the characters that you can join to them. Any HQ that can join a Boyz squad can join these guys. So a war boss for the +1 to hit is going to be amazing with them, making their hammers hit on 2s as well as adding his own fairly hefty power claw attacks. But possibly even better is actually the weird boy who can join them. And hear me out here, the unit with the weird boy can use the jump to move up the board 9 inches away from enemies. The Here We Go stratagem in the WAAAGH Detachment gives them +2 to their charge roll, so they have a 7-inch charge, and then these guys can re-roll charge rolls. On top of that, the detachment rule gives you sustained hits 1, which is very good for the limited number of attacks the Breaka boys have, and that all gives you a 7-inch re-rollable charge, and if you had the WAAAGH active, that nets you about 15 damage into vehicles or monsters, so this can easily let you kill off something like a Gladiator Lancer that was holding the backfield in turn 1. It does have some serious potential, I think, and it could definitely be worth a shot, if nothing else, as like a distraction unit for a relatively low cost of just over 200 points. Like, you are going to have to pick your targets carefully because that unit is probably going to get killed immediately afterwards. But if you've got something that they can trade up into for around that price, they can fairly reliably kill most monsters and vehicles in one devastating charge. So that is the Orks. There are some great updates for them, with a brilliant update to the WAAAGH rule, a solid change to the Big Hunt, and 2 new datasheets, which, I mean, they're both okay. The Tankbusters I think are great. The Breaka boys maybe need a bit more work, but they do have some play. So 2 very good usable datasheets to play around with as well. But as always, what do you think of the Orks post Dataslate? And have the changes made a difference to how you will be running them? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me, but until next time, I'll catch you later, guys.